everybody. Welcome. I want to start off by showing you a clip of a movie. Chances are, if you're of a certain age, you know this movie. Here we go. Just to give you some context, this movie is called Fiddler on the Roof. And it's a play based on a story of Shalom Aleichem, who wrote it. Shalom Aleichem wasn't his real name, it was his pen name. And it's considered one of the most successful Broadway shows ever. And in 1971, they made a colored movie on it, about a 3-hour movie. And it's one of those legends of Jewish life, specifically in America, but words like Anatevka and Fiddler on the Roof have become very much part of the Jewish lexicon in the last 50, 60 years. And at some stage in the movie, Tevye gets to marry off his daughter, Tzeitel, if you remember the story. And that's only after he tells his wife about an imaginary dream he had where Tzeitel's Baba showed up and told him that he must marry Tzeitel to the tailor and not to the butcher. If you enjoy good old movies and you've never watched Fiddler on the Roof, I totally recommend that you watch it. It's a lot of fun. But at some stage during the wedding, a pogrom takes place and everything gets smashed. The whole wedding turns into an absolute fiasco. And that's when this happens. Here we go. It's a short clip.
Dear God, did you have to send me news like that today of all days? I know, we are the chosen people. But once in a while, can't you choose someone else?
That's the clip. Dear God, I know we are the chosen people, but once in a while, can't you please choose someone else? That's the Jewish relationship with the chosen people. It's a very uncomfortable relationship because ultimately, some of us, when we hear the word chosen people, start squirming in our seat, asking ourselves, is it not xenophobic, racist, chauvinistic? And others of us sit there saying, God, thank you so much for choosing us, but I really wouldn't mind if for once in a while you chose somebody else. I'm like really cool, God, like I'm totally fine. Do you mind choosing somebody else? So are we excited that we're chosen? Are we thrilled that we're chosen? Are we devastated that we're chosen? We have a very ambivalent relationship with this fact that we are the chosen people. So let's start with the facts first. The facts are like this. Every single day, we say that God chose us. It's not a made-up thing by the non-Jews to tell us that we're the chosen people. We say it every day in davening. Every time a man gets an aliyah, what does he say? Baruch et Hashem avarach, Baruch Hashem avarach le'olam va'ed. Blessed are you, the God, who's blessed. Baruch atah Hashem, blessed you are God, Elokeinu melech haolam, God of the universe, asher bachar banu mikol ha'amim, that he chose us from amongst all nations, v'nasan lanu es torah, and he gave us his Torah, Baruch atah Hashem, blessed you are God, noten HaTorah. So, bachar banu, every time a person gets an aliyah, they're saying, thank you, God, for choosing me. On the Chag, we just had Shavuot a week ago. We say a special prayer in the Amidah, only on Chagim, but it goes like this. It's right after the Kedusha. We say it both in Shachrit and Musaf. It goes like this. Ata bechartanu mikol ha'amim. You, God, chose us from amongst all nations. Ahavta isanu. You loved us. V'ratzisa banu. And you desired us. V'roimamtanu mikol al shainat, and you picked us up above all other nationalities. V'kidashtanu b'mitzvaysav, and you sanctified us with your mitzvahs. So bechira, this fact that God chose us, is very much a part of the Jewish narrative that we have about ourselves. God chose us. Every single day before Shema, just before you put your eyes on your head, you say the blessing, Avat Avarabah. And what's the final words? Baruch atah Hashem, habocher be'amo Yisrael be'ava. Blessed are you, God, who chose his Jewish nation with love. Again, choice, choice, choice. So the fact that we're the chosen nation, at least if you go on the biblical text and you go through our Siddur, that's not the question. We say it and we're proud of it. So really the question today is not if we're the chosen nation, but what does it mean? Historically, many nations decided that they're the chosen nation. But no nation has ever been as uncomfortable with it being called the Jewish nation, the chosen nation, as the Jewish people. We are very awkward about it. So when you ask a Jew, are you the chosen nation? He or she will go something like this. Well, the truth is they say I'm chosen, but ultimately, if I'm honest with myself, I don't think we're chosen. And I'll be honest, it makes me feel very uncomfortable. And what does it mean I'm chosen? So let's first get this out of the way. When we say God chose us, what does that mean? It doesn't mean that he chose you because you're better. Let me give you an example. If I have two books in front of me, this English book, the Alter Rebbe, and this book, beautiful Chumash Bereshis, Genesis, and I'm choosing which one to read now. Is that a choice? No, because chances are if I'm in a lazy mood and I want to read stories, I'll read this. If I'm in the mood of learning text-based, I'll learn that. So that's not a choice. Ultimately, it's choosing me. In other words, it's not an equal choice. A choice can only be applicable when I have the absolute freedom to choose something. But at this stage, yes, I'm free to choose either one, but ultimately one of them is pulling me more based on the interest, based on if I enjoy reading Hebrew or English. True choice, our sages teach us, are only applicable when it's two equal things. When you walk into a store and you have two Apple 10 phones and you choose one over the other, not the black over the white, because again, that's not a choice. You're attracted to one more, so you're not choosing it. That's a case of attraction. And this is a very important point I want to reiterate. When you choose the black phone over the white phone, or the white phone over the black phone, you didn't choose in the purest sense of the word. You were attracted. When you chose somebody to marry, you didn't really choose as if everybody was equal and I choose you. No, this person attracted you the most. You found their character, their look, whatever, the most attractive. You took them. But was it a pure choice? No, because free choice can only happen when there's two apples, both of them red, both of them equally looking as tasty, and I choose one over the other. There's no reason for it. Because if there is a reason, then it's not a choice, it's an attraction. It's not choice that's free. Free choice by definition means that I'm absolutely free of any attraction, of any pull to any item. So when we say God chose us, that means essentially that we're not more special. Because if God chose us, in other words, he wasn't attracted to us. We don't say, God, Baruch atah Hashem, that you were attracted to us, because then, in other words, we're saying we are better looking or we're more fantastic. We're saying God chose us. So by definition, choice means that we're equal. And nevertheless, I choose you. Why? I don't know. Just because I just want to. I exercised my free choice. There was no pull to anything other than the fact that I wanted to choose you. So that's the first qualification. What does choice mean? Free choice in its ultimate form is that there is zero attraction for one over the other. So we're definitely not better. Historically, Jews have always believed we're the chosen people. But I think it's important to think about, what did that make us feel about ourselves? Have Jews ever walked around as, I'm not talking about individuals can always corrupt an idea. Have Jews ever walked around and killed people because they're not chosen? So you'll bring me an example when the Jews invaded the Holy Land 3,000 years ago. That's the only time we find murder in Jewish history, at least commanded by God. But that had nothing to do with being chosen. That's a discussion for a different time, whether it was ethical or not. But ultimately, God said, conquer the land and kill the inhabitants who don't want to make peace with you, and they did. But it wasn't an act of, I'm chosen, you're not. Versus, for example, the Nazis on the total extreme, lahavdil, to the total extreme, they didn't claim to be chosen by God because they don't believe in God, but they claimed to be the choicest. But claiming to be the choicest of amongst all civilizations, Aryan, blonde, blue eyes, what did that cause them to do? What it caused them to do is to murder, to kill, to maim, to destroy any form of life other than what they consider the best of the choices. What has chosen meant for the Jewish people? Ultimately, most of our history we've spent in ghettos, being beaten. So like Tevye and Fiddler on the Roof, and that's why I started the shir with that clip. For us, chosen often means chosen for a real rough ride. We were chosen for a real roller coaster. Our history has been very complicated. When the Jew says, I'm chosen, they are not saying, I'm chosen over you. What they're saying is, God wants something from me, and he put me on a unique journey that is incomparable to anybody else's journey. And the Jewish journey is incomparable to anybody else. And let me explain what I mean. Not better, different. We've had quite a history, a tumultuous history. A lot of blood, a lot of sacrifice, a lot of up and down, a lot of drama. We were chosen to play a big role on the world stage. That's why all nations of the world are given 7 commandments of Noah. Don't kill, don't steal, don't commit adultery, set up courts of justice, believe in one God, do not curse God, do not eat a piece from a live animal. That's the basic 7. Beyond that, there's respect parents and a bunch of others. But the non-Jew has relatively few obligations. They have no obligation to keep Shabbos. They have no obligation to keep kosher. They have no obligation to keep family purity. They have no obligation to fast on Yom Kippur, whatever it is. When we say we're chosen for a responsibility. I want to give you a very personal example from my life. I was chosen to be the rabbi of Linksfield Shul. They had other candidates, they chose me. Thank God. What does chosen to be the rabbi of Linksfield Shul practically mean? Chosen for a responsible position. You have to deliver sermons, you have to give shiurim, you have to counsel people, you have to bury, you have to do bar mitzvahs, you have to do things. In other words, when I was chosen for something, what does it mean? I was chosen for a responsibility. Now, if I walk around in the shul atmosphere and all I can do all day is boast about what I do, I would actually create disdain towards me amongst people. Why? Because if you're walking around boasting the fact that you're chosen, it's actually sick. Rather, to earn people's respect and to do the moral thing, you lead from behind, you do your job, and you don't sit there walking, tooting your own horn. I'll give you a personal example of your life. You were chosen to be a mother. You were chosen to be a father by God for that child. What does chosen mean? Does that mean that you start walking around with a big stiff back and absolute pride And boasting? No, on the contrary, that means you take your responsibility to your children extremely seriously. You take your mandate seriously. So that idea of choice is actually should be changed more to the word obligation. When we say we're chosen, what we're saying is we're obligated, we're committed, we are in something bigger than us. The Jewish people being a chosen nation simply means it's a nation that was given tremendous amount of responsibility, much more than other nations. Why? Again, not because we're better. God chose us. Now, I want you to think about this. What I'm about to say is very controversial, but it's true. If my job is there to be as a light unto the nations as a Jew, so who's serving who? Often people have this myth that the non-Jew is there just to serve the Jew. But the truth is, if I'm here to be a light unto the nations, then it means essentially that I, the Jew, I'm here to help the non-Jew. I'm here to serve the non-Jew. In other words, the 15 million of us were put on this world to be a light unto the nations for others, to serve them. Now, does that sound elitist to you or chauvinistic to you? On the contrary, no. We were given a mandate to bring light to other people, to teach the world morality. So much so that Maimonides says that the rise of Jesus, JC, and Muhammad, and both of them have Jewish roots, was because it was a Jewish mission to teach the world to believe in one God, monotheism, and therefore they were birthed out of they were branched out of our faith. So the Jew does not walk around feeling better if they know what they're doing. The Jew walks around feeling obligated. Now, here's something that I'm going to say, and it's important. Quite often, you'll hear Jews talk disrespectful about non-Jews. And by the way, at any stage, if you want to ask a question, feel free to ask a question. We have a wonderful crowd today. Does that come from knowledge or ignorance? When a Jew talks disrespectfully about a non-Jew, that is ignorance. When a Jew has words, and I'm not going to use them, to describe a non-Jew derogatory, that has no basis in Judaism. I'll give you an example. You know one of those big myths that Noah cursed his kid that they'll be dark? Do you know it's a myth? It's nowhere in the Talmud. It's nowhere in the Torah. It was just a justification that slave owners used in the United States in the 17 and 1800s. So a lot of the things that people claim basis for disrespect of other nationalities and other races has no basis in Judaism. It's rather a culture that created. Now, you can understand Jews were tormented a long time by non-Jews. So eventually, a lot of the Jews developed a cynical approach to the non-Jew. Again, I'm not justifying it, heaven forbid, I'm explaining it. But when the Jew comes and sits there saying, and I've heard this, and it hurts me beyond words, a Jew says that a Jew born to a Jewish mother is more Jewish than a convert, it's absolutely false. If somebody converted in the Beth Din and went into a mikveh and was declared Jewish, they are 100% as Jewish as you. That come from the Bubba. The fact that it doesn't feel right to you, so what? If my kid came home and married a beautiful converted boy or girl, according to halacha, I would be 100% thrilled because they are marrying a Jew. There is nothing less Jewish, just like there's no such thing as being half pregnant. And it's important for me to qualify that at this point of the shir so that I get it out of the way. This idea that sometimes you hear in the Jewish community that a convert is any less part of the club than somebody else has no basis in Judaism. It is just the same drive, the human drive that makes some people racist, xenophobic, homophobic. It's that same drive. And that is we're afraid of otherness. And because we're afraid of otherness, we create categories within us. We other, as in a verb, we other the other, we make them feel different, and we walk around with this qualification. I come from the shtetl. My Zayda went to Lithuania. He learned the Novardok in yeshiva. So he's more Jewish than you. Really? You see, what's amazing about Judaism, about Jewishness, is if your grandfather was a tailor, and your grandfather was a rabbi, and your grandfather was a mass murderer, and the other person's grandfather is sitting in prison, and the other person's grandfather, it doesn't make a difference. You're 100% Jewish. Do you know that Hitler, he had a brother? His brother's step-grandson, in other words, Hitler's brother after the war married a woman who already had grandchildren. Hitler's brother's grandson converted to Judaism. And a few years ago, he shared his story. And suddenly, people in the community started ostracizing him. How can Hitler's step-great-nephew walk around Jewish? But the truth is, even Hitler's nephew can walk around Jewish if he wanted, if Hitler's grandson. I mean, we learn in the Talmud that the grandchildren of Haman, the guy from the Purim story, learned Torah in Bnei Brak and were some of the greatest sages. Haman comes from Amalek, the arch enemy of the Jewish people historically, the nation that Solomon was ordered to destroy. Therefore, each one of them, they were ordered to destroy each one of them. Their grandchild, Amalek's grandchild, was one of the great sages in the temple. Now I received a question, and I'll take it. It's a fair question. How come the daughter of a convert may not marry a Kohen if all Jews are equal? So first of all, I'll just qualify that's not 100% true, rather a convert herself, or a daughter of two converts. In other words, if both parents are converts, then she can marry a Kohen. If only one of her parents, she can. Well, it's the same question, why can't a divorcee marry a Kohen? Because just because we're all equal doesn't mean that we're all have the same qualifications. I'm not a Kohen. However, if I was a Kohen, I would not be able to marry a divorcee. If I'm a Kohen Gadol, a high priest, I'm not able to marry a widow. What did the widow do wrong? What did the divorcee do wrong? She married an abuser. Torah has different definitions and different categories of who marries who. But ultimately, it's just because we're not given the same privileges doesn't mean we're all equal. I'll give you another example, men and women. When we say that men and women are equal, it's not the same like saying that men and women are the same. That's not true. We're equal in front of the law. In other words, we're all created in the image of God, and we all deserve dignity, and we all have our role. Doesn't mean, nevertheless, that a woman puts on tefillin and I light Shabbos candles. No, it doesn't. So when we say that we're all equal, when I say that the black man and the Chinaman and the Indian man and every woman and every human being on this planet, all 7.5 billion of us are created in the image of God, I mean it, 100%. The fact that that person doesn't have to put on tefillin because they're not Jewish is irrelevant. They have a different role to play. Just because we're all equal doesn't mean we all have the same role. I am a rabbi. I cannot for the life of mine ever be called up for the first aliyah of the Torah because I'm not a Kohen. No matter what. So different roles is okay as long as I respect the different role. If I walk over to my domestic, I'm not even sure what the politically correct word is, the woman who helps in my house, who helps us raise our children. And by the way, I always tell my children that she is almost your third parent because she's given you as many hours as we have. And she's raised you, especially when you're in your younger years. If you look at that person and you see any less image of God than in yourself, the problem is not in them, the problem's in you. The problem is not in Judaism, the problem is in your misinterpretation of our perspective. God sees each human being created in the image of God. And any idea that causes me to be xenophobic, causes me to be racist, causes me to be sexist, causes me to be chauvinistic, causes me to be homophobic, any any of these xenophobias has no basis in Judaism. I'll give you a perfect example. In the Torah, it says, "V'ahavta l'reacha kamocha," love your neighbor as yourself. It says that once. Do you know how many times it says love the foreigner as yourself? Over 30 times. Love the convert, love the foreigner. V'ahavta tager, love the convert, love the foreigner. Treat them nicely. Let them make sure they join you. 30 plus times. So everyone quotes that one thing, love your neighbor as yourself. In other words, love the person you're like. That God says once. But love the foreigner over 30 times. Why? Because God knows us. And he knows that we have a real issue with otherness. And we love labeling. And the way we feel good about ourselves often is by putting ourselves and saying, I am better. So let me clarify. When we say we are chosen, we are not saying we are better. We just say that we were given responsibilities. I was given a responsibility as a father. Doesn't mean I'm any better than somebody who's not a father. But the fact is I have 6 children and I better raise them. And that person who doesn't have children doesn't have that obligation, whether by choice or by circumstance, no judgment. And please God, if they want children, they should have. The point is, when I say I have to be a father, I'm not coming to the person who's not a father and saying I'm better than you. All I'm saying is I have a role to play. And I was chosen. God gave my wife and I these 6 children, and these are the children we have to raise. I'm not here to raise your children. On the contrary, I'll be breaking my boundaries if I do, unless I'm their teacher. However, my children, I have a role to raise. I was chosen to play this part. When I walk around and sit there saying, I'm chosen to be married to Chaya, does that mean I'm better than you? No, that's my role. This is the pasher, this is the person Hashem wants me to spend my life with. Chosen only means chosen for a role. So when we say we are the chosen people, it's a half a statement. We are the chosen people for a role. So that leads to the next question. So what about the convert whose family is not Jewish? Now what? Are we better than them? Heaven forbid. Heaven forbid. Do they not go to heaven? Heaven forbid. Heaven is not for the Jews. Do you know that even in the Messianic age, we're told there'll be non-Jews there? And we're the only religion that says that. In Islam, the utopia, when Muhammad comes back, everyone will be Muslims. In Christianity, when JC comes back, everybody will be Christian. In Judaism, most people won't be Jews when Mashiach comes. In our utopia, in our perfect world that we imagine, a majority of people won't be Jews. So what kind of utopia is that? If I'm chosen and I think I'm the best, then by definition, what I should imply is everyone will be like me. But that's not the case. So I don't get it. If we're so cool, don't we want everyone to join us? And for those of you who had to convert to Judaism, you'll know that we make converts' lives miserable. I don't get it. If we're chosen and we're here to proselytize, then why shouldn't we try to bring that choice onto everybody else, just like every other religion tries to get new members? No, because again, we don't see our role to be the role of 7 billion. It's just a role that we were given. If somebody insists on joining us, of course we welcome them. If you want to take on the role with us, this huge burden, fine. But we don't feel that the non-Jew is any less worthy of dignity. So it's not my job to walk over to that non-Jew and say, hey, I'm here to redeem your soul. And the only way you can redeem your soul is by becoming Jewish. No, because I don't think heaven is for Jews. I think heaven is for good people. Judaism does not see Jews in any difference as a good, decent person than anybody else. On the contrary, it's actually harder for a Jew to make it to heaven because they have a lot more obligations. We believe Chasidei Umas Ha'olam, the righteous amongst the Gentiles. If you go to Yad Vashem, you'll see thousands of trees planted for all those people who saved Jews during the Holocaust. We call them Hasidim, righteous Gentiles. You know, Hasidim, like that word Hasidim, we use that for non-Jews who are righteous. So if in our utopia, we don't see non-Jews becoming Jews, in heaven, we don't see everybody Jews. So then and we don't encourage people to join us. So you have to wonder, what exactly does chosen mean? In other words, it doesn't mean anything like any other religion, because any other religion who feels that they're the truth, their claim is that they have a monopoly on truth. And therefore, you're either part of it or not. You either believe in what they believe in, and then you go to salvation, or you don't. And by the way, this explains why Jews have never grown as a nation beyond small numbers. I mean, today we're tiny, we're even smaller than pre-Holocaust. But even pre-Holocaust, when we were 18 million, we never were big. Why? Because unlike Christianity, and we're not saying Christianity was wrong in what they did, on the contrary, they brought more people to believe in God. But unlike Christianity that saw its role to bring everybody to be like them, Jews, we only saw our role to make the world a better place, to teach the world goodness and kindness and ethical and justice. But we were not here to get everybody to keep Shabbos. And we're not here to get everyone to keep kosher. For crying out loud, I could barely convince my Jews. As Chief Rabbi Sachs says, whenever he gives the lecture and nobody falls asleep, he knows he's talking to non-Jews, because Jews will all fall asleep. The non-Jews are much more respectful of it. But we're not here. When I meet a non-Jew who's open and willing to listen, and I could chat to them about anything, it's not remotely on my agenda to ever get them to keep Shabbos. It's not my role. And it's not their role. Not because I'm better, I get to keep Shabbos and you don't. No. Just like I don't look at my wife every morning and say, woo, I put on tefillin, I'm so cool, I'm a man. And she doesn't look at me every day and say, and I have the children, woo. Doesn't work like that. I respect her for her role. She respects me for my role, hopefully. And in a good relationship between the Jews and the non-Jews, the Jew respects the non-Jew for the role they play in making this world a better place. The non-Jew respects the Jew for making their role. There's another question coming in. It's awesome when I get questions. It makes it so much more stimulating. I've heard that people wanting to convert or people who have converted, why is the process and the Beth Din make it so difficult to become Jewish? Because ultimately, good question. First of all, I'm not here to justify. Sometimes Beth Dins will make it very difficult. Specifically in Israel, sometimes they can be extremely difficult. But the reason according to Jewish law, we're supposed to be difficult, why? Because we don't believe in converting people. In other words, the only reason somebody would want to convert to us is if they really want to take on the Jewish role. Otherwise, play your part. Be a nice person. We don't see being Jewish as progress for that person. That person could go to heaven and play their role 100%. If you want to join, fine, and take on the full obligation. Just like if you want to become a citizen in a new country, you have to accept it. Now, the fact that there's people born Jewish that don't, that's irrelevant. If you're born that way, there's nothing we can do about it. I can't out-Jewish you. But if somebody wants to join, a Jew by choice, we say, listen, this is the package it comes with. Take it or leave it. But we're not going to tell you you're a bad person if you don't take it. We don't even encourage you in the first place to come. We don't think there's a point. Honestly, if I could look at if I've had people reach out to me, often it's like random people that I don't even know. They find me on Facebook or WhatsApp, etc. They reach out to me and say, Rabbi, I want to convert. And my first question is why? Because it's awesome. So learn about Judaism. But I want to be Jewish. Why? I don't know. Then, in other words, you can learn all about faith. Think about it. When it comes to faith in God, the non-Jew has the same obligation as a Jew. So a non-Jew could learn all mysticism. A non-Jew could learn all that the Torah has to say about faith in God. It could learn about everything the Torah says about justice. It could learn about everything that the Torah says about marital morality, murder, dignity, etc., etc. We're not coming and telling the non-Jew, you don't belong here. No. All we're saying is, why do you want to join this? It's a different role. If you insist and you feel like there's a calling inside of you, you were born to take on this role, fine, we'll take you. But otherwise, we don't see it as a calling for us to convert you. On the contrary, we see it as a calling upon us to convince you to just play your part. Because we don't see ourselves as better. So we don't need to better you by making you join us. So when the convert, and I had a person reach out to me recently and say, Rabbi, so how does Judaism look at my non-Jewish family members? And my answer is very straightforward. If they're good people, then you will be with them in the afterlife. And 100%, you want to sit shiva for them, even though maybe you're not obligated according to halacha? Sure. You want to light a candle for them? Sure. You want to respect them? Of course. Of course. And therefore, and the reason I chose this shir now, and this is where I'm going to go for the next few minutes of the shir, is what's going on in the United States and this whole conversation about race. I know many rabbis are avoiding it, etc. I'm not here to say if George Floyd was a hero or not. I'm not here to sit there saying if whatever happened, the policeman, that there should be police, there shouldn't be police. No, what happened was absolutely evil. They killed a man. And it opened the conversation that we as a community must have. And that is, do I look at other people as less God than me? Some people have this fantasy that God is white and has a long white beard. In other words, God is male and Anglo-Saxon. Really? Really? Maybe God's black. I mean, maybe he's Chinaman. But that whole thing is ridiculous. Since when does God have a face? When we say that God, we're creating the image of God, in other words, the human body, the fact that we have a mind and a heart, and the whole makeup of the human being is created based on certain energies within God. But the mind that you have, the mind of the black man and the mind of the Indian, they're all the same. They're all created the image of God. When we say in Ethics of Our Fathers, Chaviv Adam, beloved is the human being. Shenivra B'Tselem, who was created in the image, what we're saying is every single person. I'll tell you from this week's Parsha. This week's Parsha, it says, Ve'a'ish Moshe anav mikol adam asher pnei adama. That Moshe was the most humble man who ever lived, more humble than anybody. Say the commentaries, he felt lower and humble even in front of non-Jews. In other words, it's not that he said, oh, I'm humble in front of Jews. Everybody, kol adam, every person. Understand? If we're a bunch of elitist chauvinists, what does it mean Moshe feels humble in front of a non-Jew? Again, because we don't see it that way. We don't see people's blood as lesser. Now you're going to sit there to bring me a story about a Frumi who disrespected. You'll bring me a story about a racist. You'll even bring me a story of a rabbi who's a racist, etc., etc. As if that proves anything. All it proves is misguidance. All it proves is a corruption of the ideals. Unfortunately, I had the dismerit of a few years back of being in a shul where a shir was given that had a very strong racist undertone. And I was furious when a person uses a shir, when a person uses the word of God to justify othering another person, for me is criminal. How dare you? When you can look at another person and see them any less, when you look at a person in your community who converted and you see them as any less part of the community, you're the problem, not them. Rabbi Akiva came from converts. Rabbi Meir was a convert. And many of our greatest sages, Onkelos, who's on every single page of every Chumash, was a convert. Abraham was a convert. We don't see other people any less than us. Definitely those who chose to be Jewish and every person who's not Jewish as well. A person wants to be a racist, that's their free choice. But a person wants to be a racist and blame it on religion? How dare you? How dare you? So my question to you is when we say we're chosen, are we being chauvinistic? Not at all. All we're saying is we have a role to play. I was chosen for a role. It's a tough role. And that's why we don't encourage the convert. We, according to the Talmud, when somebody wants to convert, we tell them, do you really want to take this on? Really? You want to be harassed? You want to be hated just for who you are? And let me just say one other thing. Unlike some Ashkenazi Jews who think that Jews are a race We're not. You could be black and Jewish. You could be Indonesian and Jewish. You could be Aboriginal and Jewish. Doesn't make a difference. The fact that most Jews you know are white, first of all, historically, we weren't white, we were Arab. Sephardi Jews look more Jewish than us. So the Jewish look is definitely not white. Originally, when we were a family and we were a race, before we spread out to the world, we were the Arab race. Definitely not the white race. But anybody could be Jewish. It's not as if a black man walks into the basin and then the basin looks and sits there saying, oh, based on the color of your skin. Give me a break. We're not a race. That's what the whole nonsense that besides the fact that Nazis were a bunch of idiots on so many levels, this whole idea that Jews are a race, that's not such a thing. Anyone could be us. If a person wants to take on the 613 mitzvahs, walks into a basin and could understand and learn, you are accepted. Any gender, any race. And it's been interesting the last week to read different articles written by Jews of color and the discrimination they often feel. And I get it. Again, we don't like other. It's the human condition. But each and every one of us, if you can walk out of this year, for me, this would be the biggest success of this year. If you could walk out of this year and when you look at somebody who looks differently, you treat them with dignity. When you see otherness, you remember that it's your eyes, it's your perception, but in truth, they are God's child as much as you are. Then I've made a difference. A video that was going around this week was something that happened in 1991. I've lived through it. I was then living in Crown Heights, and it was the famous 1991 riots between, it was a one-sided riots where pretty much, unfortunately, a Jewish man knocked over a young black boy in a car. It was a mistake, but well, he did kill him. And it let a lot of tension from the black community burst out, and there was a lot of riots for 3 days. They pretty much ran wild, and I was locked up at home together with my family. Thank God I lived in the center of the neighborhood, but many people who lived on the outskirts had smashed windows, etc. And there was a murder as well. And at some stage after, there was a lot of people trying to bring peace in the neighborhood between the Hasidic and black community. And they came in front of the Lubavitcher Rebbe. And the video was going around, I'm sure you've seen it, or you could find it all over Facebook. And the fellow, I believe it was Mayor Dinkins, who was a black man, comes and tells the Rebbe that I hope there will be peace between the two peoples. And the Rebbe says it's one people, living under one government, under one God. Really? Really? One people? Yeah, yes, absolutely. I dream of a day that we're just all South Africans, not white South Africans, colored South Africans, black South Africans, this color, that color. I dream of a day that just like the first question I don't ask about a person is what job they have. I don't care about what race they are. I don't care what gender they are. I don't care what their sexual orientation is. That we don't identify with what's the most different about us. Even the way I said, a black man, I hope that it's not just a man with a woman, not the gay man or the lesbian woman, none of that. We just reach a day where we're all human beings. You happen to be that color, you happen to be that orientation, you happen to be that religion, cool. That's your journey. That's your life. But to identify as that. The Nazis had a terrible idea, which actually came from the United States originated in the United States. And that is, and they based it on Darwinism. I'm not blaming Darwin, but there was a thing called social Darwinism in which they basically claimed that we all came from monkeys and there's different stages of evolution. And the most evolved amongst all people are the Germans, and other races are not as evolved. We don't believe we come from monkeys. We believe we all came from Adam. And we don't know what color Adam was, and we don't care. But we know that we all share a common ancestor. And we should be living in this country grateful to live in a colorful nation. And I know some South Africans do not see it this way, but believe me, I grew up in New York. And when I walk in the street, then every man and woman greets me I feel privileged to walk the streets of South Africa because it's not like that everywhere else. That there is a rainbow nation here. Yes, there's violence and there's other nonsense, but on the most part, we are a united community. If I don't greet the person at the till, they get offended. And for me, that's beautiful because I didn't grow up greeting people at the till. It was actually, you don't greet the person. That's the way you show respect. And over here, it's no, you show respect by greeting. We live in a culture of absolute oneness. It is a rainbow nation, and it's based on good values because that's what we believe. As Jews, we treat everybody. And in our utopia, everyone will be there as long as they're a good person. And in heaven, your family will be there. If you're a convert and your family did not convert with you, you will see your family. Because if they were good people and you're a good person, you both played your role. And that's the way I wish we could just see each other. Different roles. My role is a rabbi. Your role is a doctor. Your role is a designer. Your role is a dad, a mom. Just roles. But humanity? George Floyd, you, me, all deserve the same dignity. And this whole pathetic argument about whether he was a good man or a bad man is totally irrelevant. I find it disrespectful. So what? If he was a criminal or not a criminal? Even a person on death row should never be killed that way. I'm not saying if death row should even exist. What I'm saying is nobody, any human being created in the image of God, even if they've done the worst, most evil things, deserves dignity. So this is the point of the argument when someone says, okay, Rabbi, now you're becoming all liberal. Why don't you stand up for Jews who get hurt as well? I do. And when anti-Semitism comes, we stand up against anti-Semitism. But if we're a light unto the nations, and if we're here to be decent role models, then when we see injustice, we stand up in it. We stand up for it, against it. I personally believe it's a moral obligation as a Jew when you see injustice to stand up, whether you're considered left or right or anything, because we believe in human dignity. And we believe that every person, even a prisoner, is created in the image of God. And therefore, even prisoners, we don't believe should ever be mistreated. Anyone. Once they're obviously not a menace to society. If they're a menace to society, you have to lock them up. But once they're no longer a menace, you treat them with dignity. Because you're talking to a piece of God. The fact that the person made mistakes, fine, they'll be accountable for it. But if you think that the life of a criminal is any less valuable than the life of a saint, then we have a total misunderstanding of what the dignity of life is. A holy man's life and a corrupt man's life are both life. A baby's life and a successful businessman's life is both life. A man's life and a woman's life, a Jew's life and a non-Jew's life. Life itself is dignified. A person with preconditions in their 80s is worth shutting an economy for, because we believe that above else in dignity. I hope, as we wrap this up, that I've offered you some insight on the Jewish perspective. I hope you realize that when we say we're chosen, all we mean is that we're responsible, that we do not look down at all at any person who's different than us. All we try to do is to get our fellow Jews to take on their role more. That's why I'm here to teach, to try to encourage. All I'm saying to my fellow Jews is, we have a role to play, so let's play our role. And to the non-Jew, if they would listen, I would say, and you have a role to play, and play your role. And let's just make this world a better place, because we're not building a place for the Jews. We're building a place for humankind. We're building a utopia where every good woman or man will belong and will feel at peace. And I pray for that day that we will all stand together shoulder to shoulder in dignity, in love, and serve God as one people. Amen. Thank you so much. God bless you all. I thank you so much really for joining. It's a privilege to have so many of you join our Shiurim. Please God, Wednesday night, how could a world created by God have gone this crazy? I look forward to have you. Once again, I will finish off with some music. God bless you. God bless you all.